She lived in Mexico, and in 2000, she retired to Kauai, which has always been a fantasy for me to live in Hawaii, so I want to hear more about that. She's into ballroom dancing and hula dancing. She's taken classes in both. In 2012, she became interested in genealogy. She kept hitting some walls, so she and her brother did a DNA test, and then she went on to take more classes and became somewhat of an expert. And now she is a genetic genealogist. And I really appreciate her being very flexible and agreeing to do the Zoom meeting today, because she was scheduled for next January. And I was trying to figure out how this was tied into Veterans Day. And I think it really does perfectly, because all of us are here because our ancestors were veterans. So just all the research we do, we really honor them by participating in DAR. And someone like her is really an expert, and really great that we have her in our chapter, and I'm very excited for her presentation. So take it away. Karen.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I can.
It says Genetic Genealogy?
No.
No.
Okay, what do I need to do, Sharon?
Can't hear me. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, you need to share the screen.
Okay, share screen. Okay,
There you go.
there you go. Can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay, let me turn my sound up just a little bit. Okay, so the presentation I'm going to be doing today is a very complicated. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by it, because you will have the opportunity to get a copy of this presentation, and also with the audio. And then I also will make available to you my PowerPoint presentation, which won't have the audio in it, but you'll be able to look at the slides at your convenience, so that you can go through it slowly when you have time, and go through step by step at your own pace. So this is going to be an overview, and I don't expect you to really understand everything today. You'll get it eventually. And my email is, of course, you know how to get a hold of me. In genetic genealogy, what you do is you look at your chromosomes where you match with your cousins that are have also taken DNA tests. And your ultimate goal is to have a map of your chromosomes that shows which segments you inherited from which ancestor. This is part of a picture of my genes, which I inherited from my second great grandparents. It shows the maternal and the paternal chromosome for each chromosome, 1 through 22. You can't see it all on the screen, but it's there. And I can recognize which ones I got from which ancestor because of my analysis, which I'm going to explain. There are 8 steps I'm going to go through. I actually could take an hour for each step today, but I'll just go over it very quickly, and then you can review it yourself. The first step is to take a build your family tree. And I highly recommend Ancestry, because they have so many resources of records, and you can look at newspapers and all kinds of things. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And you want to build your tree back as far as you can up to the 1600s. You don't need to go any further than that. And throw in the kitchen sink. If you have an ancestor you think is a possible ancestor, but you're not sure, just put a question mark next to their name and their profile, so that people will know when they're looking at your tree that that's a potential ancestor, maybe not confirmed yet. Once you've built your tree up from you, then you need to download it to your computer and save it so that you can use it on other websites. And then after you do that, start with for genealogical genetic research, start with your second great-grandparents and build your family tree down. Find your second great-grandparents' children, their children, and their children. Bring it down to the present, if possible, and whatever lines you can do that. That does take a while if you have a large family with lots of children, which most people did back then. So that will help you when you get your DNA matches to determine how those people that match you in like second, third cousin realm, what your common ancestor is with them. Then you want to get tested at, I would recommend getting tested at all the 4 major DNA sites. Family tree DNA is the one that I use for my own private project, and it's also where the DAR has the Patriot Project. So I first of all get tested there, and then as long as you have a tree on Ancestry, get tested there, because they have very robust family trees there, which make it much easier to do. MyHeritage and 23andMe have some resources also that are very good. So I also recommend that you tested all 4 of them. You'll have quite a few cousins who are duplicates on all the different ones, but then you'll have new ones on each one of these sites that you can use. And then the additional sites that you can use, if you can download your raw DNA data from Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage or Ancestry onto your computer into a file, and that you can upload to other sites that do analysis. There's a company called GEDmatch, which is very useful for a lot of genetic genealogists use it, even though it doesn't have a lot of tree information. It does allow you to do a lot of DNA comparisons very easily. There's also, on MyHeritage, you can get a cluster report, which I'll show you an example of. And on DNA Painter, if you can paint your chromosomes with your ancestors, which is very fun. It's what I was showing you that very first picture. This is painting your chromosomes with your ancestors. This is the cluster report, or a fragment of my cluster report that I got from MyHeritage. What it does is it bunches together your matches into clusters. They match each other. And so each one of these clusters will represent an ancestor that you have in common. So if you look in a cluster and maybe it has 10 people in it, if you know the ancestor that you have in common with 2 of those people, then the other ones are going to have that same ancestor. So it makes looking for common ancestors very much easier to do. When you're doing genetic genealogy, you want to, besides getting yourself tested, you want to get your parents tested if they're still alive. If they're not alive and you have aunts and uncles, get them tested. And then if you don't have aunts and uncles and parents, then you want to look for first cousins and second cousins on either side of your tree to be tested so that you can compare them with your matches and determine your matches, which side of your family tree they're related to you on. There are also on a family tree DNA, there's surname projects. So your family's surname, if you, like I did, you got my brother tested and he joined the surname project Johnson for our Johnson family tree. And those were the first kind of projects they had on family tree DNA, were surname projects. Those are public. Anybody with the same surname can join it, and the person that is administering the surname project groups the people together in how closely they're related. You can also, once you have lots of people that you've tested in your family, maybe your aunt, your uncle, your first cousins, your siblings, you can create your own private family tree DNA project, which I did. And all you have to do is ask them and they'll give you permission and show you how to set it up. And then you have access to these people that you put in your project and that you can invite other people into your project. You'll have very easy access to looking at their results. which makes it much faster for you to do some research. Today is Veterans Day. And so Nancy asked me to try and to throw in veterans into my presentation. So here's my throwing. Today, all of our patriots are our first American veterans. So if you want to honor your patriot ancestors, join the get tested at Family Tree DNA, FTDNA, and join the National Society of the DAR Patriot Project. You just once you get your first page, you'll have an opportunity to join projects. You search for NSDAR, it will come up. And then the person I communicated with, that was named Ruth, and she told me what I needed to do to join, which was basically to put in the patriot number of my patriot, my national number, and then how I was related to that patriot. And then you can also put in your siblings and your aunts and uncles and other people that descend from that same patriot into that project. And I just have one patriot right now, but I know some of you have as many as like 20 patriots. You can join all of your patriot projects, and they'll tell you how to do it, so it's not hard to do. And that's one way you can honor your veteran patriots is by joining this project. The project used to be just the Y-DNA, which is the direct mail line, but now they've opened it up to the autosomal testing, which is all the other chromosomes. And I'm not sure they know what quite to do with them yet, but they're collecting this information so that they'll have some ability in the future, I think, to be able to confirm DAR patriot descendants by DNA. That's my hope. The next thing you want to do is to learn about DNA inheritance patterns. I'm sure you know most of this. The Y DNA is passed down just from the father to son. If this is male here, the U, he only gets his Y DNA from his father, who gets it from his father, from his father. So if one of these, your grandfather, say, has 3 sons, and they have sons, their DNA, Y DNA, will match your DNA, your brother's DNA. And so that's how they do analysis on Y DNA. They look for matches from people that descend from the common direct grandparents. The the mitochondrial DNA, which was something that's done for a lot of ancient research, is handed down from mother to children. It's in the ovum, it's not in the nucleus. And so every child gets it, sons and daughters, but sons do not pass it down to their children because they don't have ovums, they have sperms. And so it goes down the maternal line. And most people, it's hard to do much research on mitochondrial DNA because of the name changes every generation. But sometimes people use mitochondrial DNA to research whether or not, say, your great-grandfather had 2 wives, and you don't know which one was your great-grandmother. And so you can have other descendants who descend from those 2 wives get tested for mitochondrial, if they have the mitochondrial pattern inheritance, and see if they match or if they're different. Then you can figure out which one was your great-grandmother. The X chromosome is passed down from both parents. The father only gives it to the daughters because X and Y are the sex chromosomes. Women have 2 X's, men have X's and Y's. So if the father gives a Y chromosome, it's going to be a son. If he gives an X, it's going to be a daughter. So there's a peculiar inheritance pattern for the X chromosome. If you have an X match with somebody, it means you have an ancestor along where these green inheritance lines are. And when you're looking for ancestors in the rest of your tree, you look at your chromosomes 1 through 22, which are called your autosomal DNA. And this is recent. This is in just the last few years that people have started doing this. And so it's a relatively new thing. What you're going to be doing is looking with your matches for a common ancestor somewhere in your family tree. So here's you get DNA from all of your ancestors. The further you go back, it might be, the segments might become so small that it's not detectable anymore. But certainly within your third, fourth great grandparents, you should have some DNA from each one of those. And then you're going to be matching your cousins with your ancestors based on DNA. A little bit of terminology. A SNP is a little one base pair point where you get tested in your genome over points that vary over time, and they test over about 750,000 of these in a DNA test, and they compare those with your other matches. And a centimorgan is a length, a measurement of how long the segment is that you're looking for. A segment is usually at least 700 SNPs, and centimorgans that are less than 5 centimorgans could possibly be just random matches. And so when you're doing DNA analysis, you want to only work with centimorgan segments that are at least 5 centimorgans or more. Well, I'll show you more about that later. Another thing to consider when you're doing your DNA analysis is that your chromosomes that you inherit from your parents are a combination of segments from their parents and a combination of segments from their parents. And the inheritance looks like this. There's something called recombination, where during the formation of a baby, all of the cells that are being reproduced, there's the cells that are going to become the brain, there's the cells that's going to become the body parts, and then the germs, the cells that are going to become the germ cells, that is the sperm or the ovum. And those cells reproduce in a different way than the other ones. What they do is the chromosome from the father and the chromosome from the mother actually recombine, and then they separate again into 2 new chromosomes that have DNA from all of those mixed together, so that you get a bigger mix of DNA. And then just one of those goes into the sperm, and then the other one will go into another sperm, and that would be a potential sibling to you. That's why you don't have a lot of the same DNA as your brother or your sister, because you've got a different combination of DNA there. The more distant your relatives are, your cousin matches are, the less likelihood that you will match them on DNA. It's kind of random. And also your great ancestors, you won't match, you'll match fewer and fewer ancestors as the generations go back, just because every chromosome gets recombined and to little smaller pieces every generation, until eventually some of them might even disappear, and you may not even have any DNA from, say, a 6th great grandmother or something. When you do your DNA analysis on the websites, you want to start with your closest relatives, your closest matches. As I mentioned before, you want to start matching. This is my sister Lorna, my brother David, my Aunt Clara is my dad's sister. Robert Wayne is my mother's brother. They were both Johnsons, not related. And then I have a first cousin on my mother's side, a first cousin on my father's side. And those people you want to get those people tested so that when you get down your list, you'll be able to figure out how those people are related to you. First thing you want to, the first thing that you want to know is, are your cousin matches related to you on your mother's side or on your father's side? And you do that by matching them with, see if they also match your aunt. Your paternal aunt, if they're in common, she matches them as well as you do, then you know they're on your father's side. If they match your mother's brother, then you know they're related to you on your maternal side. Why do you need to know that? Because you get, remember, you get 2 chromosomes. You have 2 copies of number 1, 2 copies of number 2, all the way down to 22. And you need to determine which chromosome they match you on when you start doing chromosome matching. So you need to know, first of all, are they maternal cousins or paternal cousins? And then once you know something about your matches, you want to go in your site here. This is Family Tree DNA, but you can also do it on the other sites. They have little places to make notes. And so you go to your notes, and in this one here, this is a guy named O'Neill. You can't see his name there, but he's in, ICW is in common with my sister Lorna, my brother David, and my first cousin Barbara, who is on my father's side. So I know that this person is related to me on my father's side. I also know that his brother Robert matches me on Ancestry DNA. So I just made a note there of that. So I figured out that his common ancestor, most recent common ancestor to me, was John Hoover and Melissa Osborne. So I make a note of that, and I put my relationship there with him. He also is in common with Steve Hoover, who is right here, who is my known second cousin. I already knew he was my second cousin. So make notes about the relationships. You just start with the closest relationship and just work your way down. When you get to one second cousin that you don't know how you're related to them, there's no information on the website, send them an email and include information. I'll give you a sample here. You want to ask them, tell them where you match them on Family Tree DNA. You think you're second cousins. If you have chromosome information, put that on there. Ask them if they have a tree to share. Some people do. Some people don't. Some people don't have a clue who their ancestors are. But you can ask them, okay, what's the name of your grandparents? What's the name of your great-grandparents? Do you know that much? And sometimes you can figure out how they're related to you, because remember, you've already taken your family tree from your second great-grandparents and built it down to the present. So if one of their great-grandparents or grandparents you can find in your tree, then you know how that person is related to you, and then you can go back and confirm it with them. Is this your grandpa? Is this your grandma? And you can fill in a lot of information that way. Let them look at your family tree, give them a link to the tree to look at. And if you have some idea how they might be related to you, like if they're in common with your paternal aunt, then tell them, hey, I think you might be related to me on my father's side. So look on that side of my tree, see what you can find. Then the next thing you want to do with your close matches, starting, well, even with your aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters, make sure they're in your family tree. Put the other ones as you find them, put them in your family tree, your second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, and how they're related. How your great-grandfather had 5 sons, and this son had 5 children, and just put the ancestors to your matches in your tree down to them, so you can find them easily for research later. And then what you want to do, besides putting them in your family tree on Ancestry, is you want to go to your profile of them, that person, in Ancestry. And you have a little button where you can, up by their profile, by their name, that says D, it has a little marker there. And you can go and make notes about that person, how they're related. And I always make a note that says DNA match, so that when I look at that person, I know immediately that I'm matching them in DNA. And I go into the plus add section, and I'll put a little note in there that says there's a DNA match to Karen Bernard on 23andMe or wherever it is, so that I can reference that later. If somebody else, if I find another match who's you know, a first cousin to them, and I can research this later. You're going to be putting your family tree on family tree DNA as well. You can either upload a GEDCOM, or you can put it in manually as you wish. And here's my tree on family tree DNA. And I have, here's me, and there's my sister and my brother, my Aunt Clara, my father's side, my uncle on my mother's side, and some cousins. And you see these little red, little colored dots there. That means that they've been linked in that tree. So what, what that means is, let's see, where is it? Okay, so my Aunt Clara, who's on my father's side, I put her in my family tree, and then they will give you an estimated range of relationship. But once you link them in your tree, they will actually put this information here. She's your aunt, and she's related to you on your father's side. And that's the information they got from this tree when I put her in here. And then I went up, there's a little marker up here, you can't see, but it says link someone in your tree. You click on that, and then you find Aunt Clara in the list, and then you just drag her over here and link her onto this person. And then she's linked in your tree genetically. So then the company, Family Tree DNA, knows that her DNA and your DNA is related by being your aunt. So they make that note, she's your aunt. And she's related on your father's side, so they know that. The other thing that is helpful with linking people in your family tree there is that once she's determined to be on your father's side, there will be more distant cousins that are related to her and you on those same DNA segments, and they will automatically note them as being on your father's side. So when you get down your list further and you don't have information, you'll know, hey, that's a paternal. After a while, you'll find that many of your very closest matches, you'll already know they're on your mother or father's side because you had your close relatives linked. So start with your closest lists on your tree and just go down. Don't try to go to your fifth cousins and look for things. It's going to be very frustrating. You want to start with the closest, and then the information as it expands while looking at the closest people. Oops. Oh, then what you want to start doing is, once you have quite a few of your people that you know how you're related to them, who your common ancestors is, you want to start a spreadsheet to document the information. And this is one way just to keep all the information that's going to be useful to you in one place as far as the DNA goes. So you can get the DNA, you can get this. This is my spreadsheet. People organize them in different ways. What you want to do is list your matches, not all of them, but chosen matches that you're going to choose. Listed on your paternal side and your maternal. You can do 2 different spreadsheets, one for your paternal, one for your mother is probably a good way to do it, because then you can sort them by ancestor or by chromosome number or by cousin. And I put in here who our common ancestors are. These are my second great grandparents, third, fourth, and then I put in this information, which is, I'll show you how to get that. You put the name of the person, the cousin that you're matching, that you got the chromosome information from. And then you make a note of which of the different DNA companies that you've got the match on. So I use Family Tree DNA 23 and my heritage most likely. Sometimes I have some GEDmatch. Then there's a place for notes. You can put how they're related, or you can put if they have a family tree link, you can put that in there. And this information here, chromosome, the start point, the end point, the number of centimorgans, the number of SNPs, those are very easy to get. All you have to do is when you match a cousin, there's my cousin Steve Hoover, my second cousin, on Family Tree DNA, you go to get a chromosome, let's go back up here. Does it show it here? No, okay. What you want to do is do a chromosome browsing. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Yes, here is the list of your cousins. Up at the top here, you can browse your chromosomes. You can see who's in common with them, who's not in common, and you can search by ancestor names. So when you get to the first person you don't know, you want to look at their chromosomes, you look at the chromosome browser, and it will show you how that person is related to you. You can look at the particular detailed segment data, which is what this is. You're going to ignore all the centimorgans here that are less than 5. So just ignore those and just look at the ones that are over 5. All you have to do is smear those with your computer to copy, and then just transfer that information right there. So that is very easy to do. It's not, you don't have to copy out, put all those little numbers in. And some more terminology. Phasing is when you're determining if your cousins are going to be on your paternal or your maternal side. That's why you need your aunts and uncles and first cousins tested, so that you can compare them with them to see if they're related to them as well. And then triangulation is where you're going to determine who, I should say, confirm who your most recent common ancestors are. This is I have here my cousin Mark Johnson, who's actually a first cousin once removed, my mother's first cousin. And these are the people who are in common with him. So they're all on my mother's side. That's my uncle on my mother's side. And these are first cousins on my mother's side. So I know that his relationship is true. And I go to and look on the chromosome browser. I go and pick some of the people down the line here. He had actually 16 pages of common matches with me. And I picked out, actually I did some work. It took me about an hour to do this work, to come up with this group of people here that are in common with my second cousin and me. And this is where they match me on the chromosomes. And how you confirm that is, I was looking at all these people. Do they have common ancestor names that are up the tree from this cousin? This cousin of mine, Mark Johnson, he's related to me by this couple, James Johnson and Lucinda Cheney. So people that match him and me are going to be related to us up this tree somewhere. They're going to have Johnson, Ferguson, Cheney, or Hunter. So when I looked in the matches here, I looked for people that, but you can't see it here, but you have a place here where you can look at their ancestors, and you can pick the ones out with those names, and then you can compare them on the chromosomes. Excuse me, on the chromosome browser. And what you're going to be looking for are matching segments that are what we call stacking. Like here on chromosome 12, this is Mark's chromosome here. This is a chromosome that belongs to Joseph McCann. And this is the chromosome that belongs to Kate Doherty. And see how they stack there? These are all matches to me. So there's really 4 people, these 3 plus me, that all inherited that segment from the same ancestor. And when a segment like these are smaller the my close cousin, he's my, as I said, my first cousin once removed, then these two matching segments here will probably be related to me further up the tree, either as a Johnson, a Cheney, a Hunter, somewhat up the tree. So I can look at their trees to start getting clues for my more distant ancestors. And that's the way you can confirm and find ancestors that are further up the tree.
Hello.
So I would be looking up the tree for Johnson, Ferguson, Cheney, and Hunter. And in this case, with my second cousin, who I just had tested recently, I was able to confirm Hannah Ferguson's father. So that was very handy. Once you've gotten your spreadsheet full of a lot of different segments, you can transfer that information to DNA Painter. And DNA Painter will provide you with a color-coded display of your ancestors painted on your chromosomes, which is really cool. And this is, for instance, part of my paternal chromosome paintings here. As I mentioned before, this is a second cousin, this dark blue here. I can, they will actually show you, I can't do it now because this is just a screenshot, but there are actually several segments that I had that made up this total segment here, and I can look at them independently on this on the website. And then these are my paternal second great-grandparents, and there's their names. There are couples: Russell Osborne, Minerva Wilburn, Hoover Decker, Thomas Maples, Johnson Palmer. And so each one of these segments is handed down from these known ancestors. And so now I know that. And this is the area here, you can tell where when they were divided in the recombination, that's where they separated. So, and same here. It's called the crossover. And when you get your chromosomes completely painted or mapped, you can break it down into different, whether you want to show your first great-grandparents, your second great-grandparents, your third great-grandparents. This is a sample of one that goes, I guess, up to about third great-grandparents. And you could have a name, you'd have your name on third great-grandparents, a couple names on each one of these segments here, and you can identify that. As I mentioned, the crossover point are these areas here where it changes from one segment to another segment. And you'll have some blank segments in between, and sometimes you can infer who your second or third great-grandparents are by filling in that blank segment because they're not showing up anywhere else. And then you hope to be able to confirm that with matching cousins and their trees. And remember that every one of these segments here, say these are our third great-grandparents, they're also divided up within themselves to your fourth great-grandparents. So when you start getting to really distant cousins, if they match you within this larger segment here, they have an ancestor with you who's further up your tree. That's what that means. And so if you have a matching segment with someone, as long as it's at least 5 centimorgans or greater, which is usually the companies will only show you ones that have larger segments, so you won't just disregard the other segments. It means you have a common ancestor. And so let's say this is your mother's chromosome here on the bottom that you inherited. So you've been able to figure out that this little segment here, you inherited from this couple up here, and this one you inherited from this couple, and this one you inherited from this couple. And these are your mother's ancestors. Once you've been able to figure out those segments, as I mentioned, when you get a matching segment inside one of those segments, you know that cousin's related to you by that couple or someone up from them. And that's how you use genetic genealogy to find those distant ancestors. You're going to have to do a lot of research in trees and hopefully have a lot of cooperation with your cousin matches. But it takes time, but it's very rewarding when you can break those brick walls. I was able to figure out that, let me see, let me go back up here. Let me find it. Let's see. I was able to break my direct paternal family tree. Here it is. This is my family tree. And when I first got into genealogy, I was able to take all of my lines, except for 2 lines, all the way back to the early 1700s and the 1600s in this country. The only 2 I didn't have was my mother's direct paternal line, the Johnsons there, James Johnson line, and my own paternal line, Travis Johnson, Eugene Johnson. And they stopped right there at my second great grandparents. And it was very frustrating for me since I'd had all my other lines go way back. And that's when I got my brother tested with the Y-DNA. And to my utter shock, when my brother got his Y-DNA test back, instead of being matched to all Johnsons, all of his matches were last named Andrews. And this was very confusing to me at the time since I was just starting out. I had a long conversation with my husband's cousin who happened to be an expert genetic genealogist. And we decided if the name is not the same, you're going to either have adoptions, children that are born out of wedlock or by the neighbor, or someone who purposefully changed their name. And so I didn't know what the case was for my grandpa, John Johnston. So I started emailing my cousins on Ancestry, or messaging them on Ancestry, several different ones that I found that were related to him down line from his other sons. And I eventually got an answer from one second cousin who said he had a letter that he thought I might be interested in. He scanned it and sent it to me. And it said, basically, that John Johnston had told everybody that he was adopted. And so then my journey became, well, how do I find who these Andrews are that he was born into? And it actually took me about several years to figure it out. This was in 2012. I just found out really last year, confirmed the family that he was born into. And that's all by doing, actually I got a breakthrough because a lot of the Y-DNA matches he had were very generous to me, sharing their trees with me. So I had a general idea what the Andrews family was, but I didn't know specifically which one it was, which person. But I got a break on Ancestry DNA. I had 2 third cousins show up, and that were the closest Andrews family to me on Ancestry DNA. So I asked them if they would join my family tree DNA, where I can get the Y test for them, which I did. They both were generous enough to join and let me use their DNA, their Y DNA, and their autosomal DNA. It was very convincing. It was that they were very closely related. They probably were third cousins because they matched my Aunt Clara, my father's sister, closely, and other me and my siblings. And so then I had their fourth great grandparents, my third great grandparents, as my potential ancestors. It was a couple named David Andrews and Elizabeth Brown. And I was then able to confirm that Elizabeth Brown was my ancestor because I had some Brown cousins that went to that same tree and matched on the DNA. So this is how you use that. And I'm working right now with my cousin Johnson to try and figure out who James Johnson was. And I'm sort of starting to think that maybe his father was an immigrant, because that's why I don't have any, because a lot of the Johnsons and Fergusons were from Scotland, the next generation up in my matches. So you get to solve some mysteries when you do the DNA that you can't find just by looking on family trees. Let's see. So the first thing I would say to you is to get tested. Right now they're having a sale on family tree DNA until November 25th. They usually have sales around the holidays. And right now you can get the Family Finder, which is the autosomal DNA test, for only $59, and the Y-DNA for $199. And then join your Patriot project on family tree DNA and offer your DNA for their research. You can join the International Society of Genetic Genealogists. Anybody can join. And they have a lot of webinars and information there that you can use. Then take it a step at a time, and just start with step one and go through it very slowly and take your time. It does take a long time, but it's very rewarding, and it's also, it's exact. When you have a match with DNA, it's a match. They're your ancestor, they're your cousin. And so, you know, have fun and, you know, see who you can find. Okay, I think I'm done, Sharon. Unless people have questions or we have time. I don't know how time is going.
It's wonderful, Karen. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do we know when Ancestry, for instance, I believe their DNA test, people in Canada can use it, I think. And then we can see Canadian matches, I think, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Can we see English matches if someone takes it in England? Do we know any of that?
Well, most of your matches will be in the United States because Americans are the ones that have taken most of the tests. But they are offering tests in other countries. It's just that they really haven't gotten into it as we have into the DNA testing. But yeah, they can do it. And if you have somebody in England or somewhere that you want to have a test, you can send them a test and they can get a test.
So this guy contacted me. He lived in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted me to pay for his test. And I delayed. And 2 months later, he said, oh, Ancestry was now selling them in Canada. And he paid for it himself. He was trying to get me to pay for it when they weren't selling it. Then they were selling it. And he came in as a match to my husband. So I wondered if someone in England went to Ancestry.com and took a test, DNA test, would they show up as a match to me, or do they keep the databases separate? Is it all one database from whatever country someone is, you know?
Well, I don't know 100%, but I would guess that they would allow that person to be matched to everybody in hopefully their database is one big database and not, little country databases.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question to ask the Ancestry people. You can message them, and I'll message them and find out. But I do have a lot of matches from other countries, and so I'm assuming that they got their tests where they live, but don't know for sure.
I have a question, Karen.
Yeah.
Several years ago, I asked my brother to do a DNA test. I sent him a kit and he did it and sent it in. But I'm at a loss as now how to access that information. He didn't want to open an Ancestry account necessarily. So I got the impression that somehow because of privacy issues, I could not access his DNA report.
What company was it that he tested on?
Ancestry.
Ancestry. And that was a Y-DNA. I think that Ancestry, from what I understand, is not supporting the Y-DNA test anymore. And so that may be why it's not there. Now, he may be able, for himself, to download that raw data onto his computer and upload it to other sites.
How would I do that? How would I have him do that step?
Yeah, well, he can go to Ancestry. If it's still showing his Y-DNA results on Ancestry, there is a button on the front page that will allow you to download your raw data.
Okay.
And then he'll have that on his computer, and then he can upload that to other sites.
So any of the 4 tests that you mentioned, he's going to have to go on his computer and go to those sites. I can't do it without him doing it first.
Well, if he gives you access, if he downloads the Y-DNA, he could share it with you, and then you can upload it. But you have to have that raw data, or he has to take another test.
Actually, if he goes into ancestry.com where his DNA information is, if he goes into there and makes you a manager on his account,
Okay.
then you can see his stuff. That's what I had. Everybody that I sent kits to, I had them make me a manager on their account so that I could see all their stuff and monitor it.
So I guess to be clear, my brother's going to have an Ancestry account, right?
No, I think I just had them because most of them don't. I just had them because they get a link to Ancestry when they get their results.
Yeah.
And they can use that to set you up as a manager. They don't have to have an account themselves. As long as you're the manager, then you can tie his stuff into your family tree. As long as you're the manager, he has to make you the manager.
And how does he make me the manager?
He goes into Ancestry, and where they would have given him a link to his results.
Yeah.
He can go in to that link. He doesn't have to have a full account. He can just go into that link.
That's a big help. Thank you.
Okay. Karen, I have a question.
Yeah.
With the splitting of the chromosomes and remixing, is it possible that a person would have 0 DNA from a great-grandparent?
Probably not possible. You would have DNA from a great-grandparent because it's close enough that you're going to have it. So if you have no DNA from that person and you've done lots of looking, they're probably not your great-grandparent.
Okay, it's interesting. Yeah. I asked because my his mother's sister, who has firsthand knowledge, says that their grandfather was Native American. My husband's Ancestry.com DNA came back 0 Native American. So we really question that, but she has firsthand knowledge, so we don't understand what's going on there.
I think that happens in a lot of families because I have the same thing on both sides of my family. Both of my grandmothers were supposed to have been part Native American. And I had actually done the mitochondrial DNA, which is handed down mother to mother to mother. And it turns out my mother's mother is probably more Irish and my father's mother is Portuguese from, going way back. And that accounted, the Portuguese at least accounted for the black hair. But I know it is very difficult to pin down Native American DNA because their DNA differs from Europeans not very much nowadays because of all the 400 years, 500 years of combining European DNA with the Native Americans. So it's hard to distinguish it. There are a few markers that they have that are very specific, but if you didn't happen to inherit that specific marker, it's not going to show up. You're just going to show up as a European.
I see. So it is possible that that particular marker would not have been passed down even to a great-grandchild.
Yeah, it is, but it's probably not that for a great-grandparent you're talking about.
Yeah.
they're probably not 100% Native American. They're probably, you know, maybe they're 20%,
Mhm.
you know, but they are known as 100% because
Yeah,
of the pure DNA. So
I see.
that's what
Okay, thank
happens.
you.
Yeah,
I have a question,
yeah.
Karen. Does DAR use the DNA genealogy when we're approving applications?
They just started accepting the autosomal DNA, the one through chromosome 1 through 22, the family finder, which you know, the women can take. They just started doing that, I think, this year. From what I understand, they use it in combination with the Y-DNA. So for in case, like, if your brother was tested with the Y-DNA and he is a patriot, and he matches with the other patriot direct male ancestors, and then you have some autosomal DNA that shows that you're related to your brother or, you know, related to the other cousins, then they'll accept it. But I don't think right now they're not accepting autosomal DNA by itself as a proof. I think probably down the road when they get more data, they may be able to have enough data that they can do that. But starting out right now with so few people having contributed the DNA to them, the autosomal, there's not much you can do if you don't have very many data points. So someday they probably will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one other question, Karen. This has been wonderful. I have so many questions about it all, and I want to say thank you. The bottom of each of your pages, there's a, I guess it's an email address, jimforbartlets@verizon.net. Who is that? What is that?
That is a cousin who I matched, and we, through DNA, figured out who our common ancestor was going way back. And he happened to have a house in Hawaii that he vacationed at. So I met him when he came over on vacation, and he and I became very good friends. And he's the one who had initially a PowerPoint presentation that he gave it to genealogy conferences and to genealogical conferences, like the Southern California Genealogical Conference in Pasadena. He gives conferences. He gives DNA for genealogy presentations at those conferences. He's the one that allowed me to use these slides. And I told him I was going to change some of them and rearrange it. And he said, that's fine, you can use them. So I'm grateful to him for allowing me to use his as kind of my template for my presentation.
Oh, that was my question. I wondered if we needed to get a template from him to give him credit for these templates, or how?
No, you don't need to contact him. You can get these from me. My email is
Yes.
well, you have it in your little mailer. And I can send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation if you wish. Or I think Sharon is going to be recording this and allowing us to have access to that on YouTube. Is that right, Sharon?
Yes, it is being recorded, yes.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? I see Shelley's square